Welcome to the first episode of Civil War Breakfast Club. I am your co-host, Mary, also known as Civil War Fangirl on Twitter, and joining me is my co-host, Darren.
I just go by Darren.
You are not. He is Darren.
Cool...
He's Darren J. Weeks on Twitter.
I don't have a cool nickname, but that's okay.
So this is the first episode of our Civil War podcast, and yes, we are called Civil War Breakfast Club, but we are actually recording in the evening, and while we record, we're drinking beers. So the concept behind this is basically we wanted a Civil War podcast to do some deep dives into certain aspects of the Civil War, but also do some funnier topics as well, just because we both like to use humor in everyday life as well as on our Twitter account. So that's basically the concept behind it. Do you have anything to add to that, Darren?
Nope, I think you hit all the spots. I think it's fun. We'll do a little pop culture in this. We'll definitely do a lot of history and learning, but we'll have some fun doing it along the way. Hopefully, people will watch this. They'll get a kick out of it, learn something, and watch it again.
And I mean, the podcast was so funny. We were drinking beer during it because that's something that we both enjoy doing. The podcast was actually, you could say, and then beer happened, and then the podcast happened. That's
cigars too.
Yep. Yes.
Good Southern tobacco.
Yes. Yeah. For those who are not watching this via video, for those who are listening, Darren is smoking a cigar right now. We are both drinking out of Civil War mugs. So tonight I am drinking it is called Lost Craft Eclipse Milkshake India Pale Ale. And that I am an IPA girl. That's pretty much all I drink. You can find me on Untapped, Civil War Fangirl, and you'll see I'm all about the IPAs. And I'm drinking it out of Rocka Chickamauga because he is my favorite Western theater general. We will get to who my favorite general is later. What beer are you drinking, Darren?
Well, I'm drinking from Antietam Brewery, Little Mac IPA, and it takes forever to drink because it's just a slow drink, without a doubt. And I've got it in my Gettysburg mug because everybody wants to know, what if Little Mac was at Gettysburg?
It never would have happened. He never would have got there.
You were south of Cashtown, hung out there for a while. Never
exactly. Yeah. What's the alcohol content on your beer?
That's a good question.
It's probably overestimated.
It's definitely. It's 1 million.
It's definitely overestimated.
Wow. So Little Mac is overestimating his numbers? That can't be right. No, I think it's like 6%. It's what you call a morning beer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I'm Canadian, so I basically wake up and drink beer, right?
Nothing wrong with that.
So anyway, actually, I'm going to give something. Well, I was going to talk about this later, but so the reason I chose the beer I did tonight, it does not have a Civil War connection like Darren's has, but what it does have on it is a crescent moon. And the crescent moon is the symbol of the 11th Corps, which was commanded at Gettysburg by my favorite general, Oliver Otis Howard. If you follow me on Twitter, you know the sort of love affair I have with that man. And also, Darren and I are both Team OO.
Definitely fans of Oliver Otis Howard, a good solid Mainer,
yep.
from New England. I'm in New England. I live in Cape Cod, so Maine isn't too far from here. And I think we both have an appreciation for him. And he kind of has a bad rap, I think. He does, and say you think.
Just a little bit. I found that out.
Well, and I think, he ended up having some problems in the East, as we all know. Ended up moving over to the West. And I think it changed the teams, helped the location, helped him out a little bit, because certainly he became one of the apples of General Sherman's eye.
Yeah.
On the March of the Sea.
Right wing.
Definitely the right wing. But I think at the same time, I think Howard does get a bad rap in the East, though. I think he does.
He does.
And if you want to go to Gettysburg and get in a fight with someone, just mention Sickles, mention first the 11th Corps who broke first, and mention Howard. And not for some reason, if you're a dyed-in-the-wool complete Civil War nerd like we are, you run into somebody who is a fan as well, and you mention Howard, and they're going to hit you with all the all of them. His favorite web service is Sprint. Okay, very funny, But that's the way he is. He has a bad rap on it. And I think, like we were saying ourselves, once you really get into him and study him, you realize that it wasn't really totally the case. And that's one of the purposes of this whole podcast is personifying and humanizing these people. So we'll talk about Howard, we'll talk about Sickles, we'll talk about Mary Surratt.
Because we're both Team Mary.
We're definitely a member of Team, you literally, but we're definitely a member of
Hey, got to represent, right?
I'm a member of the Surratt Society, which is pretty cool.
I am too, actually.
Did you sign up again?
Yep, I did.
Excellent. Okay. So you definitely have an appreciation for some of them. So, we want to, go over these people and talk about these people so people can realize, maybe they're not so bad. Maybe Howard isn't so bad. Maybe Sickles' move is kind of messed up as it was. Maybe there was a reason for it. Maybe, and so just like anything else, you want to make people think. Yeah. And while we think, we drink.
Exactly. Because beer fuels great Civil War conversations. And again, that's what this is.
Beer fuels everything.
Exactly. Everything. We just thought the name of the podcast came one afternoon when we were having virtual beers, and we had been struggling for weeks to think of a name, and we knew we could not move forward with the podcast until we had a name. And we got on the subject of 80s movies and then Breakfast Club. And then we started talking like, oh, who would so-and-so be from the Civil War and Breakfast Club? And then that's how it came about, Civil War Breakfast Club. But we figure it's just going to be like two Civil War geeks sitting in a bar on a Friday night having beers, discussing the Civil War. And then, you guys get to
maybe we'll have some cool guests along the way. We'll see.
But yeah, further to your point about, humanizing these figures, that's what it's always been about for me in the Civil War is like, when you start exploring, more of it, that you realize that Howard is more than just Chancellorsville. Sickles is more than just that move towards the peach orchard. And there was, strategy that he envisioned behind it. Just those things too. And all the kind of the underdog characters that you don't hear about, especially from the Western theater. I mean, I full well admit that for a long time, I was really immersed in the Western theater. But in the last 3 months, actually since I became friends with Darren, I found myself going back toward the Eastern theater again and learning more about that. But you have characters in the Western theater like Claiborne, Lytle, even Rosecrans is an interesting one to study as well, that they, you do the deep dives and you can learn so much more about it and have a better understanding of the war itself too.
Well, I think we were saying that one day we were talking, it's like people associate these people as just names on a map with either a red or a blue dash next to them. And every one of these people, they have their own lives, they have their own dreams, they had families, a lot of them didn't come from the military backgrounds. I mean, some of them were political guys, but some of them were just regular people who rose. We talk about Chamberlain being the college professor and, people like that, and understanding, what it must have been like going through with that and the slow internet they had to deal with, which must have been horrible.
Exactly. Oh, it was terrible for them at Chickamauga.
I mean, all the buffering that must have happened. Imagine.
Bragg's orders didn't get to D.H. Hill.
I mean, Reynolds and Moritz Tavern must have been forever trying to download that Pipe Creek thing. That's why he never got it. Even though it would just open up slowly from the top. Remember that?
Yeah, him and Howard's on a different. Howard's got a different company, for his cell, and Reynolds is like, "Is that downloading quicker on yours?" Yeah,
and obviously Buford, he had the iPhone, but Kilpatrick had a Samsung, and the pictures kept crashing. But that's little things like that. So but understanding what these guys are all about in their backgrounds, it's cool. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be educational. I think people are going to get a kick out of it. Yeah. I think we're going to. Hey, if they don't, who cares? We'll have fun, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, this is what we do. Like, we use humor. We frequently have virtual beers together and we talk Civil War. We use humor. Full warning, we are going to swear on this. This is going to be an explicit podcast. I'd like to think the spirit animal of this podcast is Von Gilsa from the 11th Corps. Was he not the one that could swear in 3 languages?
He was. And of course, Jubal Early.
Yes.
Nobody swore like him.
Andrew Humphreys.
Yeah, he was good at it.
Yep.
Sickles, Butterfield.
Yeah, Gibbon.
Hancock.
Yeah. Hancock, yes, definitely Hancock.
Hancock is when you read and you learn about these people, some of these guys I was at Gettysburg a few weeks ago, and we were having lunch with one of the park rangers. We were talking about who we'd have a beer with, who would you want to sit and have a drink with, and it was actually harder than you think to come up with that. Because like Robert E. Lee, no, because he's just going to sit there, right? Oh. Most of these guys, I mean, I think Early or I think Sickles would be the one. I think he'd be the one.
Yep. I think for me, and I think we're going to do like a deeper dive on this with an episode, but I think for me off the top of my head, I think Armstead on the Confederate side.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a go kind.
Yeah. I just listened to Battle of Gettysburg podcast. It's an excellent podcast. If anyone listening has not listened to it yet, check out Eric Lindblade and Jim Hessler and their Gettysburg podcast. It's awesome.
Do they have Wayne Motz on that one? Because he's like the Armstead expert. Was he the guest on that one?
I think he was. Yes.
He wrote a really good book on Armistead, and it's one of those 30-page books, so you can read it in 5 minutes. I think it was called have faith in God and trust. It was whatever that quote was. He said, I haven't thought about him in a while, but that's the highly suggested thing. So that's another thing we can do is we can talk about some book ideas, and nobody enables books better than Mary. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I'm queen of the book enablers.
I don't buy a book. Amazon calls me and says, "Where have you been? You know, you all right?" Bought another one today.
I have to, and Darren is not innocent in this book enabling at all.
Oh, Darren.
Well, guess who's going to buy Fonz when we're done recording this?
You're like, and then I'm like, then you've obviously like 3 books, and it's a big an investment. The Fonz books, there's a lot of places you can go about the really good Civil War books, and especially Gettysburg. Gettysburg's always been my baby, my bebe, Yeah. And I'm more of an Eastern guy, and Mary's more of a Western person, which is kind of cool. But there's some really good books along the way we can probably talk about.
Yeah,
maybe make some of these people some money. As a matter of fact, Hessler we talked about. He's got a real good peach orchard book.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that one, and hopefully have him on to talk about his book and what he had to say about Sickles and Longstreet in it and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean Gettysburg is it's my favorite battlefield. It's also like it's tied for first for my favorite battle with Chickamauga. I think they're both equally interesting in different
You just like
ways.
the real bloody ones.
Yep, I do. Yep.
You just like the violent ones.
Yep.
But Chickamauga, that's a good one, obviously. Mm-hmm. But as these anniversaries come up, right as we sit here, it's mid-August, or I think it's August. I don't keep tracking, to be honest.
It's August 17th. We are 1 month away. It's the 18th.
It's the 18th. Right.
Yep. So we are 1 month away from the first day of the Battle of Chickamauga, which some people will say the battle began on the 19th. I've read the 20th, but it actually began, I think, on the 18th.
And we're less than 1 month away from the Battle of Antietam.
Yep, and
which is preceded by South Mountain.
Yes, which we will be talking about.
We got Second Manassas coming up.
Yep.
So there's a lot of good anniversaries that we'll be talking about too. So
yeah.
I think the plan with this is right now we're just kind of shooting the shit, hanging out.
Yeah.
But I think we'll have a specific theme for every single one we'll talk about. Try to have some guests on with those themes. Have some fun themes along the way. Mary's gonna bring her dog to bark.
Oh, goddamn dog.
And if we're lucky, we'll watch her get attacked by a bee. That'll be cool.
Or we'll watch Darren get attacked by a bee.
It's too soon.
Robert E. B.
Attacked by Robert E. B.
The Battle of Bee Ridge.
Battle of Bee Ridge, mowing my lawn a few weeks ago. I won, though. I won.
He did. I can attest to that.
They won the first day, but I came back strong the second day. There was a little Shiloh action that day for a Union person. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool to be able to do this, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because we're not the pretentious, snotty, too serious type. But I think people like to learn about these things and like to have fun along the way with it. I mean, anybody can read Coddington and those books and get a good feel for it. But we like to talk about the people, and we like to talk about the stories and the diaries and all this stupid stuff, and have some fun with it too, because they're regular people just like the rest of us, and also just tie them into pop culture things. Like we are planning on doing an episode around the Breakfast Club, because that's where our name comes from. We're going to do an episode, and what we're going to do is we're each going to watch the movie, and we're going to pair the characters from the Breakfast Club with figures from the Civil War. We're not going to tell each other what we're doing with that, but we're just gonna go through our list and tell why. Yeah, and I think that'll be fun too, and try to guess that what it is. I haven't seen Breakfast Club in forever. It's a good movie though. It is. It's a really good movie. That's one of the. Go ahead. Okay, it's one of the John Hughes made that. It was one of his movies, right? I think so. Yep. Yeah, I think he died, didn't he? I think so. Yeah, he passed away. I think. Yeah, he did. So as they say, he went up the spout, as Civil War soldiers used to say. We're definitely gonna do that, like some pop culture stuff. We're also gonna do every so often around battle anniversaries, we're going to do what we are calling right now Civil War fuck up, which is you think something like Order 191, Rosecrans' order to Wood that caused the breakthrough at Chickamauga, Bragg's war council or lack of after the first day of Chickamauga, stuff like that just were mistakes in the Civil War. But then the other thing that we talked about doing today was underdog moves, like these generals or whoever colonels that shone on the battlefield that really were true heroes that you never hear about, like Lytle at Chickamauga. He's one of those underdog stories. And to Howard can be, I think, classed as an underdog too, that he just, you think Howard, when I did a unofficial poll on Twitter after I'd announced him as my favorite general, and I said, what's the first thing you think of when you hear the name Howard? Chancellorsville. And I still can't believe the response you got on that. Oh, yeah. You would have thought, like, you stood up and you said you were going to, I don't know, whatever the worst thing a human could possibly do and make an announcement about. Yeah. Because the response you got, and it was funny because it was just unexpected. I guess it was unexpected to a point, I guess, but it was just some people got so pissed.
Oh, it was great. So I guess the background of this, for those that don't know my background, but I mean, if you've been following me on Twitter for a while, you know that I have been what I would classify as Sherman fangirl forever. But I just, and I still love Sherman as much as I did. I have not cast him aside at all. The way I liken it is that Sherman is like General Meade and Howard is now General Grant. I have not demoted or fired Sherman.
You mean like how Meade was demoted when Grant came?
Or fired?
It's so funny.
I put a PSA about that on my own personal Facebook page like 5 years ago. I'm like, PSA, Meade was not fucking fired.
And that's another thing we're going to talk about is the misconceptions, the mistakes people make.
Yeah.
We'll probably talk about, dare I say, Ewell taking that hill. Talk about that. That's the one that gets the bands going. What if Jackson was at Gettysburg, which wasn't going to happen, but we could talk about that.
Yeah.
That always gets the people flipped.
Actually, Hessler and Lindblad do an episode about what if Jackson was at Gettysburg, and it's actually more examining Ewell, but still, it's interesting.
Well, it never would have happened.
No.
The battle would have been fought towards Harrisburg or Maryland if that were the case. And the simple reason is because there wouldn't have been 3 corps. The only reason they went to Gettysburg is because they was spread over a 55-mile radius north of Gettysburg, and that road system all brought them back. They wouldn't have been so spread out, so they wouldn't have been in Gettysburg. So if you're in the Gettysburg Chamber of Commerce, you should be glad that Jackson didn't make it out of Chancellorsville, because now you have a great tourist industry.
Exactly, tourist attraction.
And ghost tours.
Yes. And ghost is another thing we're going to cover on the show too, because we both find that fascinating. So we definitely want to talk about Civil War ghosts.
Maybe have a cool guest around Halloween. Maybe we'll see. Working on that.
Want to do
people
some
are talking
Halloween.
To people.
Yep. Want to do some fun Halloween episodes as well.
We could wear costumes.
Oh my God. I'm going to dress up as Barlow.
You're just going to stare off into space the whole time?
I'm just going to not talk.
You're going to carry your boombox?
Yeah.
And your sunglasses?
Yes. That's an inside joke between us. One thing we're planning for, because apparently this is a long-term thing. Next year for the Battle of Gettysburg anniversary, we are going to do an episode around theme music for each of the corps.
Like wrestling theme music.
Yeah, and we've kind of determined that the 11th Corps were like the dealers of the. Yeah.
We're gonna see what kind of kids they were. It kind of goes to Breakfast Club theme, like who were the badasses, who was the sport kids, who was like the prom queen girl. We're gonna do corps based on that, who was which.
Yeah,
we'll have fun with that too. That was actually, you know what though, Mary? That's actually how we came up with the name Breakfast Club. Was we were joking about that.
Oh, that's right where the idea came from. Yeah.
When I was sitting on the balcony of the 1863, in Cemetery Hill.
That's right.
We came up with that idea. Went out from all the way from you in Canada. We connected over the internet and came up with a great idea. Yeah. And there we were.
Yeah, here we are now talking about it.
And shockingly, there was beer involved.
Oh, we won't say what time of the day it was. I think it was like 2:30.
It
was afternoon.
It was daytime. Remember that?
Yeah, it was daylight. So both of us have obviously been into the Civil War for a really long time. Full disclosure, I just turned 38, so I am in my 32nd year.
I think the thing about the Civil War is, I grew up in Boston, just outside of the city, and everything here is a lot of history, and everything here is Revolutionary War. It's John Adams. It's all of them, right? And justifiably so, Paul Revere and all that. But I grew up one town over from Lexington. The Battle of Lexington. And I went there on school field trips, and that was really the only time I ever went because I just never really cared. I was always into history, but I wasn't really into American Revolutionary history because everyone seemed to be into it. So I ended up kind of getting into the Civil War just because there were pictures that were taken during it. You could see pictures of Lincoln and the battlefield pictures and the Antietam dead and the Gettysburg dead. So it brought it more to life for me. And then as I started to visit the battlefields, you just connect to it. And then like a lot of people, first time I went to Gettysburg, that was it. In Gettysburg, we've said this before, you don't choose Gettysburg. Gettysburg chooses you. Yeah. And it gets in your blood. And I go there probably 4 times a year, and I could be there forever, literally, And so, and then it just kind of takes over you at that point. It gets in your blood. It just kind of controls you at that point. And I've said this to you, the last non-Civil War book I read was the last Harry Potter book.
Yeah, me too.
That's how long ago it was. And ever since then, I read every single day. And growing up and didn't have a lot of friends who were into the Civil War, and I was always kind of not an outcast. I think I am more now, like at work. When I drop Civil War lines and Zoom meetings at work, when I say I'll do this project if practicable,
That's me.
In a larger sense, we cannot consecrate, we cannot dedicate, we cannot hallow this paper, things like that. And they know it's a Civil War thing, but they're like, what's wrong with you? But that's what it is. It becomes a part of you and just kind of takes over for you. And so And so as you visit these battlefields, you find out that, what the best options are for that. And then do my own personal history, finding that like I had a relative who fought. And we mentioned this on Rail Splitter, but I can tell that story again.
Tell the story, because it is fascinating. It's cool.
So a couple of years ago, actually it was longer than a couple of years. Everything is a couple of years ago, it seems. The 90s were 10 years ago as far as I'm concerned. But it was like I had someone reach out to me from the Town of Brookline Historical Society. Out of the blue, he calls me at work. My work number, I don't know how, but he says, "Hey, my name is so-and-so, and I'm part of the Town of Brookline Civil War Society." I feel he was some group that we all are a part of. And he goes, "I don't know if you know this, but I found this guy, and I ended up connecting him to your father, who gave me your number." That's how I got my number. And he was telling me all about this guy, and his name was Elihu French, and he was a guy who grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire, which a lot of my family is originally from. And he was part of the 7th New Hampshire Infantry, and he was a corporal in Company B. He signed up, and it was back when they had like 60 or 90-day papers, probably, because he was right from 1861. He's one of the first people to do it. And he ended up going to Dry Tortugas, which us Boothies know. That's where the prison is. Right. We'll do a lot of John Wilkes Booth stuff. That's where Mudd and O'Laughlin and Sam Arnold, that's where they all prison. And from there they ended up going to Beaufort, South Carolina, which if you see Glory, that's where they also trained as well. So he didn't really get in any battles. So he got mustered out and he went back and he wanted to sign up again, like me, wasn't too smart apparently. So he decided to sign up again. And they told him no. They said, "Nope, you did your duty." This is obviously early in the war, because by the end, anybody who could fog a mirror was going in the Civil War. So he moves to Massachusetts, and he goes to Brookline, the town I mentioned a little while ago. He signs up with the 2nd Massachusetts Heavy Artillery. These are the siege gun guys, the ones who they don't carry the cannons around like Bigelow and those guys. This is a guy who just pounds forts and shoots those guns that go straight up in the air. So he ends up signing on with them. And he trains in Reedville, Mass, which again is where the 54th Mass trained. But this is before, so there's connections to all this stuff. He ends up doing that. This time he does get into a battle. He ends up at the Battle of Plymouth, North Carolina, in April of 64, right? So he ends up going to that, and he gets his ass captured. He gets caught. And April 1864, that's right in the high time of Sherman doing his thing in Georgia, and the Confederates were emptying the prison from Andersonville and moving them all to a place called Florence, South Carolina, the Florence Stockade. So they were in the process of opening that up, and they moved a lot of the Andersonville guys to Florence, and they decided to send my great-great-grandfather, my grandfather's grandfather, easiest way to think about it, he gets sent to Florence, South Carolina. He was one of the initial guests of the state, as they say. He was one of the first people to check into that hotel. And so he was there for a while, and he ended up getting sick and ended up dying. And basically what it came down to is disease and starvation. They ended up having about 18,000 people in a small little place. So it was about half the size of Andersonville. But I went to visit it a couple of years ago, and it's a complete hellhole as far as what it must have been like. It was just surrounded by train tracks, so it was always defended. You could not escape. There was no way you were getting out of there. And he ended up getting buried as an unknown in the Soldier Cemetery. So I went down there. I was in Myrtle Beach for a weekend. I think, I remember almost that whole weekend. Another story. And we ended up going to Florence and I went to go find his grave per se. And basically it's just unknown Union dead in front of like a football field looking thing. So my grandfather's grandfather was somewhere out in that field. So that was pretty cool to see. And that just kind of was more of like a shot of adrenaline for me to really understand, that this family lineage and it really continued my education of this, really. I've always been kind of lighthearted with a lot of this stuff too. So I've always kind of tried fun with this stuff too, a lot of the Civil War stuff. But yeah, I think that's, and I was hooked anyway, but then most people here in your neck of the woods too, there's some veterans up in Canada, I bet,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, there are.
You guys don't all play hockey up there, right? You guys, there were some soldiers up there.
No, there was some men from my county that fought in the Civil War.
And so from there, it's a thirst for knowledge. I mean, you can't get enough of it. And most people who watch this, I have to think would feel the same way, because why the hell else would you freaking watch this?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, a Civil War geared thing. Yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll watch it. I think most people can probably relate to the story because you have similar stories yourself, probably. Maybe you have some relative, and maybe you had relatives on both sides, or the Confederate side even. You, David, as well. So there might be an opportunity for people to learn about their own family history too. And maybe, just maybe, we might give someone a reason to study their own family history and find out more about the relatives based on their own Civil War thing. Who knows? We're here to help.
Exactly. Yeah. Inspire, help, whatever. Can inspire someone to get into the Civil War, then that would
Inspire is a good word. I like to inspire people. But again, and so that's the great part about all this is I think what people need to realize is it wasn't that long ago. It really wasn't. I was sitting at the Sweetie's Tavern one night in Gettysburg, and there was this old dude sitting at the bar, and he was, he's old, 90s, really old. And so he was sitting there, and we were talking to him about the, Gettysburg and Civil War and all that stuff. And he goes, son, shake my hand. And so I shake his hands. And he goes, you just shook the hand of a man who shook the hand of a Confederate soldier who fought at this battle. And I was like, he goes, it turns out as a little kid, he was at the anniversary, the 75th anniversary at the Peace Life as a child. He met a lot of the veterans.
Wow.
And so and so he met a lot of the Confederates. And so he was meeting them. He was probably 6 or 7. I to do the math, I could start thinking backwards, but he and I was like, man, I go, that's just a couple of generations ago. If I'm talking to a guy who was talking to veterans of these battles and these wars, maybe people should learn more about it since it's kind of just happened.
Yeah.
And I think that because unlike World War II, you don't see the veterans anymore. And unfortunately, a lot of the World War II veterans are kind of going away now too. But I think because there's not that direct contact anymore, I think people kind of lose sight of that fact that this is not that long ago. It really wasn't.
No, it's not when you put it that way. It doesn't, when my father was born in the 40s, there were still Civil War veterans alive.
Yeah.
He was born 80 some years after the Civil War was fought, which kind of that's, I don't know, that kind of thing, so it's not that far removed. And I think,
well, that would be,
go ahead.
I was trying to think. So that would mean, realistically speaking, the guy must have been over 100 then, right? Because he would have been born in 1840. I mean, there was veterans who were over 100 years old for the 75th reunion. There's a really good book that I can't remember who wrote it. It's in my bookcase of interviews with veterans from the 75th anniversary at Gettysburg. Mm-hmm. And they all had stewards, they all had people with them to take them places. And I think 5 or 6 of the veterans actually died because of the heat at the reunion.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, can you imagine surviving the Battle of Gettysburg just to have the battlefield come and get you later? It's like that Final Destination movie.
Yeah, it is.
It's like you escaped, but you weren't supposed to, so now I'm going to get you.
Yeah, it's but you got to live your life because you're nearly 100, right? So, but still, I think
the book said the oldest guy was, but they said he was 107, but they weren't sure. I'll have to get the name of that book. Maybe it's another book you can buy. Who knows? But it's really interesting though. And I think when you really get into it and you realize that, like I said, it wasn't that long ago. It's pretty cool to think about your own history and your own family history, and then your own regional history.
Yeah, and for me, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, every time I travel, I always go find the town Civil War monument. I always do it, no matter where I go.
I do too.
Yeah, I mean, there's something wrong with us. Let's be honest, but I mean, but I think that's cool though, because I know whenever I go, I'm the only one there. There's no doubt about that. But it's cool to just embrace that. It's just really neat to get your arms around that history and just get out there. Gets excited of God, but it just fires you up, and it just really makes you want to learn more. Yeah,
and that's why I'm so excited.
Right now,
I love it. That's why I'm so excited about doing this podcast with you, because we're both on the same page with this. We're both so passionate about it, right? And we can hopefully that passion feeds off into people and inspires them to maybe look at their family history a little bit more. For me, it's, as a Canadian, I didn't have any relatives, not directly. My last name is Fincher, and I have done some research as to Finchers who fought in the Civil War. They fought in Georgia. They were Confederates. They definitely owned slaves, from what I've found out. So now how they're related to me, I'm not sure, but they're primarily concentrated in the southern US. But, being Canadian, it's kind of forced me to look a little bit more outside of my own family as to the Canadian connections of the Civil War, which I found quite a few fascinating ones. So for instance, Jeb Stuart was killed by a Canadian. John Huff. There
was a Canadian who was very instrumental in catching John Wilkes Booth.
Yes, Edward Doherty, who is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. There was some Canadians who won the Medal of Honor during the Civil War as well. And basically, if you were Canadian and you were going to fight, you were going to do it because you truly believed in that cause, that you wanted to help out. Now, for some of them, yes, it probably was about an adventure. From what I've read, it's about if you're going to pack up and go, you're going to help out. Now, in a town about 40 minutes from me called Kincardine, there is a monument to a Confederate. His name was Solomon Secord. He was a surgeon in an army in Georgia. He decided around the time of secession to go down to Georgia for a vacation, and he said that they captured him and made him be a surgeon, which a little bit of, I don't know, something going on in that story, but I actually would like to do a deeper dive in an episode around that monument and what he did and all that.
Well, what you're saying is a good point, though. I mean, people don't realize 1 in every 4 Union soldiers wasn't from America. That's 25%.
Yeah.
And so you think about, I mean, obviously everyone talks about the Irish Brigade, and they talk about the Flying Dutch and all that. But Canada, you know, had quite a bit.
Yep.
Montreal was a hotbed of Confederate spies.
Exactly.
I never liked Montreal.
Neither of
anyway.
us. we just alienated all of Quebec. Right now, we are never going to have listeners from Quebec. Anybody listening from Quebec is like, fuck them. We're gone.
Yeah, if you're from Quebec, just go off.
Bye.
You know, go watch watch the late Canadians play.
We welcome everybody.
Montreal's a fun city, though. I will say, I've had some shenanigans in that city. Overall, I think, you know, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about Howard, and we'll talk about that when we talk about Kelly, and we talk about all these guys. Going forward to some of these is just how important it was. A lot of the soldiers, I mean, unlike now, they weren't too welcoming to foreigners in this country.
No.
Did you notice the sarcasm right there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Barlow hated Germans.
Yeah, a lot of them did. And so he hated Germans for a million different reasons, but obviously for his own core, you know, there was, you know, obviously when Franz Siegel left, we'll do all that. But I think the realizes was they were fighting for different reasons. And what the lazy German thing I never got, because they had some really hard battles in Germany.
Oh yeah, like what was
some
that
real
one guy
ones?
from the 11th Corps that broke into that that jail all James Bond style and rescued his general or whatever it was?
We'll think about that.
Siegel.
That's deep in the back of the mind.
Yeah, I just listened.
But
to
I mean,
that
but you see, but you realize that these guys weren't liked for a million different reasons. This country never was very welcoming to people like that, even if they were fighting for their own country. And I think a lot of that comes out in those perceptions we talked about, like with Howard.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much about him, but about his soldiers,
yep.
about the experiences they have. But they forget about the effort they did on July 2nd on East Cemetery Hill. They forget about that,
yep.
The 11th Corps. They forget about, obviously, the kind of the Corps. Things were a little different when he went out west. But staying in the East, he gets the bad rap for Chancellorsville. And the one knock on Howard is he wasn't with them when the attack came. But that happens, you know, whatever. But but I think it's like we said a little while ago. Once you study these guys and you get to know them and what their plight was, it really opens your eyes to a lot of different things. And a lot of the perceptions that you might have about these guys are either wrong or diluted, or just force fed down your throat so you believe it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to do the deep dives into it, and that's what I like doing. I mean, one of the weeds I went off into was Civil War horses of all things, finding out who Little Sorrel was, Cincinnati, Rienzi. And especially old Erbaldi's story, Meade's horse, is probably my favorite because Meade took him riding after the Civil War, and they would go off, just the two of them. And I really believe the only reason that Meade was doing that was because they'd had this shared experience of something so terrible that Meade just felt at peace with him.
And of course, it was Howard's horse, Tony Montana.
Yes, Tony Montana, Howard's horse. If anybody again follows me on Twitter, you will know like a week ago I tweeted a photo of Howard's horse with a gigantic joint in its mouth.
With the horse with kaleidoscope
eyes. Yeah, because the horse, if you look at it in Gettysburg, it looks like it's high.
I would challenge anyone to go to East Cemetery Hill and look at that horse and tell me that horse is not high.
Yeah, exactly. Barlow was dealing to that horse.
Even Hancock's statue, he's like, whoa, buddy.
Yeah, dude.
You've done enough.
Meanwhile, the Christian general is okay with it. He's like, well, if it keeps him calm in battle.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably exactly why he did it, probably. Made him mellow.
I need to mellow. This guy needs to mellow the fuck out because I gotta decide on the ground here.
But the horse that was a good Facebook Live you did too about that, actually, on the horses. Because who the hell studies the horses? I mean, if you really think about it.
Well, I do, because
I'll tell you who does. Mary Fincher studies the damn horse.
I do.
That's who does.
Yeah, because they do become extensions of the general's personality. Like, for instance, like Sheridan I've read a biography about Sheridan. He was a bit of a dick at times, and his horse was also a bit of, because the horse Rienzi was actually born in just outside the town of Port Huron, Michigan, which when there's not a pandemic going on, I frequent that town every 5 or 6 weeks to go grocery shopping. I have friends that own a brewery there, so I go hang out with them. Shocking. I know people that own a brewery.
Don't we all? Those are the good friends to have.
Yeah, they are. I also know people that own a winery too, which... Yeah, Rienzi was born in that town, and he was given as a gift by the citizens of Port Huron to this one soldier. Well, anyway, the horse was like this feisty bastard that didn't want anything to do with the dude that he'd been given to. And so it was kind of a reluctant relationship. So one day Sheridan was by the horse, and the horse took to him. And the guy that had been given to him, he's yours, you can have him. He's all yours. And that was how Rienzi and Sheridan came to be together.
Yeah, I mean, everybody looks at Robert E. Lee with his horse, obviously Traveler,
yeah.
You know, and he's probably the most famous horse of all, to be honest, in the Civil War, because everyone knows that. Everybody knows who Bobby Lee's horse was. Yeah, they had a connection with them. And that's the movie Gettysburg shows that pretty well too, actually.
Yeah.
Because we had a second horse too. He had two horses, but Travelers is the more famous of the two.
Yeah, and Grant's favorite was Cincinnati, which was given to him after the battles for Chattanooga. And Cincinnati was actually the son of the fastest thoroughbred in the time at the U.S., whose name was Lexington, which there is a brand of bourbon called Lexington named after that horse. I also like bourbon. Yes.
Mary, with all of your bourbon needs.
I will enable you to buy bourbon too. Books and bourbon.
That's exactly what I need is bourbon in my life now too.
Yeah.
I do good bourbon from time to time. I was in Kentucky not too long ago. Partook in a little bit of bourbon, little cigars. Nothing better than a cigar and bourbon like that.
I agree. My favorite bourbon is Knob Creek. Not shocking considering what got me into all of this was Abraham Lincoln when I was 6 years old.
You were drinking bourbon when you were 6 years old?
Yes, I was.
Good for you. You got to start young. I mean, I know it's Canada, but still, good for you.
Oh, my foray into the Civil War.
So I was in kindergarten. We go drink some bourbon on the field. It was great though.
Oh, my foray
chasing horses.
My foray to the Civil War was one night when I was 6 years old, and my dad had bought me the Time Life series of Civil War book. He didn't buy them all for me, but I've since completed the collection. So they were just basically give an overview of various aspects of the Civil War. They're actually pretty good. So one night
are those like the picture books, those little black, the Time Life ones?
They're like coffee table size books, but they're fairly thin.
No, I have that same set. I think I got most of the books. There's a Gettysburg one, there's this Antietam, and they break it down. And it's great for the pictures.
Oh yeah, and that's I'm 6, but I was all my grandma had taught me to read by the time I was 3 years old. So of course I'm reading, and I'm reading the book about the assassination. Mm-hmm. So I knew more about the assassination and Abraham Lincoln than I did before I started into the Civil War, and the Civil War came after that. And because I was kind of just like you, I was kind of the outcast. I still kind of am a little bit. I didn't really talk about what I was doing with it, but I was going home and reading about it because we're not taught it in school at all. We don't study the Civil War here in Canada at all.
You don't get it here either.
No,
the Civil War has always been America's black eye.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in high school, we went from Industrial Revolution. It's a quick overview in about 2 days of the Civil War. Then it was Lincoln assassination. And that was it. The Lincoln assassination, I know we talked about that too. That's one thing that really grabbed me when I was young too.
Yeah.
And if there's one part of the Civil War that I really, really, really get into, it's that. And there's a lot of good books about Booth, about that. We talked about that fantastic book by Kate Larson, Assassin's Apprentice. There it is.
Which is
we didn't even plan that. That wasn't planned.
You said Assassin's Apprentice. You've got Harry Potter on your mind.
What I said. Yeah. That's why we're gonna do this with less beer. Assassin's Accomplice by Dr. Kate Clifford Larson, which I'm reading it right now. Definitely recommend it. Very good. Yeah, I don't want to spoil the ending, but it doesn't end well.
It does not end well for Mary.
No, it doesn't. And we'll talk about that a lot. Mary Surratt's somebody who I've always liked personally, always have. And so I think we both agree that she kind of was done wrong.
Yep, very much.
And some of our friends don't really agree with that, but I think it's a good study because her study is a fascinating one. I mean, you want to talk about an independent woman of her period in the mid 1800s. She never remarried. Her husband died. Took over the family business. I've always thought it was really cool that the farm she grew up on is where Andrews Air Force Base is now, where the president's plane takes off the lands all the time. And that was her land. So there's all those historical weird little connections about that. that. And we'll do a real deep dive into that. So we're just gonna decide when we're gonna do it. We'll have Dave on maybe for that.
Maybe we can actually do it jointly with Rail Splitter Podcast.
Ooh, crossover, crossing the streams.
Yes, crossing the streams. Yeah, I'm actually a member of a Abraham Lincoln podcast as well called Rail Splitter, which I've been part of for 3 years now with Nick and Jeremy, who live in Rockford, Illinois. So, but the reason I wanted to do this, that's one of my favorite movies, League of Their Own. Love it. But the reason I wanted to do this podcast with Darren is because I want to do more deeper dives into the Civil War. I don't want to take away from the Lincoln aspect of Rail Splitter podcast. So, but we do see ways that we can collaborate and work together, because the one thing that I believe of in the Civil War field is that the collaboration is great. You can learn so much from other people. There's no need to be like a gatekeeper for anything. Darren and I, like when we became friends, he's very much Eastern theater, I'm Western theater, but we know that we can learn a lot from each other, and we already have so far. Like I know more about the Battle of Gettysburg now and more about the Eastern theater, and it's great to be able to have those conversations with somebody. And how we're talking on here this is how we interact when we have virtual beers together. Like, oh yeah,
nothing talking about Bragg and Rosecrans. I even tweeted Western theater today. That's impact from you right there.
I'm proud of you, Weeks.
Western commentary hashtag.
Yeah. But that's the other thing too, is you can take like somebody like Braxton Bragg at Chickamauga, where you look at him after that battle and you can't help but laugh. He's got this, like, the Union Army, they've retreated back into Chattanooga. They're behind the fortifications that Bragg's army built when he went there during the summer of 1863. And Bragg is like up on Lookout Mountain, and he's doing like administrative work, and he's worried about that Polk could possibly be talking about him behind his back. And Longstreet is there to possibly take over the army. And Forrest is coming and telling him, like, we could get them. We really could. And Bragg's like, no.
Braxton Bragg is like the Charlie Brown of the football of this Confederacy. And what always struck me about him is it took forever for them to get rid of him. Corinth gets his ass kicked. He retreats from virtually every battle. Rosecrans was slapping him around left and right.
Yeah.
Where the Red Sox slapped the Indians around, actually, as a matter of fact.
Hey.
And well, not this year.
Dumpster fire much. Speaking of Braxton Bragg, how about you talk about the Boston Red Sox?
I also, you cut out there. What was that?
Speaking of Braxton Bragg, how are you talking about
I still can't hear you. Hey, they've won 6 games this year so far, and it's mid-August.
Winning, so like Braxton Bragg was.
Hey, he had his Chickamauga, right? But even the whole Rosecrans thing with him was funny, because it must have been his white whale for a while, because not like Rosecrans was Grant either. That was the funny part about it.
Oh no, he was confused and stunned like a duck head on the head. Lincoln's words to John Hay.
Yeah, but they kept Bragg around, and you look at like the peers in the East, where these guys are being fired every 5 minutes for different things.
Yeah.
And can you imagine Bragg fought in the Union? I mean, he would have lasted 5 seconds.
No. And that's the other thing. That's the difference between the Eastern and Western theater. Is Eastern theater, the media is much closer too. So I think they feel like they're under that scrutiny more. Whereas the Western theater, it's kind of like, I don't know, in a way I see it as being like Island of Misfit Toys in some way. Like there's all these interesting characters out there. But like Bragg, like after the Battle of Chickamauga, like his commanders get together and they sign this petition, which basically says, you suck, you need to go. And
that's literally what they wrote too.
Yeah, it is. Exactly, you suck, you need to go.
Sir, you suck, sir.
Yeah, you suck, sir, you need to go. They bring Jeff Davis down early November of 1863, and they all have this meeting, and they air their grievances, and they basically say why he needs to go. Davis is like, okay, leave the room. And he says to Bragg, don't worry, I've got your back. You can stay.
I mean, I'm not sure if he had pictures of something with him, with Verena, who knows? But there must have been some reason why he kept him. And now there's a base named after Bragg, which is hilarious for a million reasons. And we're not going to be talking about all that stuff, but I mean, just unless you want to. But in the last couple months, I've got more into the Western theater. I've been reading a lot more. I'm reading that Vicksburg book now, and you read this and you go, what the fuck? I'm like, how the hell could they make this many mistakes and still be functional and still keep these people? When you look at Hood, Franklin, and you look at Atlanta, and you look at just the dumpster fire of a shit show these guys were, and they all stuck around. I mean, Hood, they couldn't get rid of the guy. Bragg, you couldn't get rid of the guy.
No, the only reason Hood's in charge is because Claiborne had his emancipation, where he like draws up this thing where he's like, hey, if we emancipate the slaves and put them in the army, we might be able to win this thing.
That went over well.
Except he's saying it to a bunch of people that own slaves. And they're like, dude, do you understand what we're fighting for?
Yeah.
Clayburn to me was, this is my unpopular opinion, he was a little bit better than Jackson. And
I don't think it's an unpopular opinion, at least in the West anyway. You say that over in Virginia, they'll probably draw and quarter you.
Well, he was known as the Stonewall of the West, but because of that, he gets passed over for command. And that to me is why Hood, because Davis is tired of Johnston's cat and mouse, but Johnston by that point is done with the Civil War. He wants it over. So he's just playing the retreat game with Sherman. He puts Hood in charge, which is like Hood has sacrificed his body on the altar of the Confederacy, and he's going to expect his men to do the same.
Yep. It really is something when you get to know these guys, like we were saying before, knowing these guys as people and learning about their own history and how they did it and how they talked.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not even 100% proof that the whole Stonewall Jackson name was a compliment by B that day.
Yeah, it was supposedly could have been sarcastic, like, well,
just he was standing around doing nothing. There goes Jackson like a stone wall, and like calling a fat kid slim or something. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was an insult that stuck. Maybe that's why he got stuck in that tree.
Well, and exactly, yeah, and that's the thing.
In the persimmon tree that day.
Like Jackson dies at the right time to where he's elevated to this almost like deity-like status where, again, it goes back to Howard. So, I mean, you say Howard, you think Chancellorsville. You talk about Jackson, you never talk about, what was it, Kernstown?
Kernstown.
Where he fucked up?
Where he got pantsed hard,
yeah,
and he blamed Garnett for it.
Yeah,
and Garnett was kissing his ass right to Gettysburg. That's why he rode the horse at Pickett's charge, because he wanted to prove his mettle to all them. It just goes to show what a prick Jackson was, if you think about it.
Oh, he was totally that way. And yes, Jackson had his talents, but I think when you compare him to people, especially in the West, to Albert Sidney Johnston, to Patrick Clayburn, to Hardy, there's some, like, especially Clayburn, there's aspects of Clayburn that are better. And the reason Clayburn doesn't get elevated to that status is Clayburn, with his emancipation, does not fit the Lost Cause myth at all.
Well, where was Clayburn from?
He was from Ireland.
Well, that's part of it too.
Yeah, exactly.
It goes back, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It was Irish guy is coming in here and he's telling us to free our slaves. And he was right all along. Yeah. But to your point, especially after the Emancipation Proclamation, there's no way they were ever going to do that.
Mm-mm.
And so he ends up kind of being held back and pushed down a little bit,
yep.
While the good old boys of the South, Jackson and Beauregard and all those guys. Actually, Beauregard got pushed around a little bit too when he retreated from Corinth that time.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to think at Shiloh when he's going in. So, I mean, Johnston at Shiloh is out in front with his men. He knows what's going on, but unfortunately, because of that, Johnston gets shot in the leg and he dies. Beauregard, as we're calling him now, is back behind the lines.
it's Beauregard.
Beauregard now. We will change the names if we can on this podcast. He's back behind the lines, and the next day, they don't expect that bombardment they get. So Beauregard's, chief of staff, I think it was, says to him something like, "Are we not like a lump of sugar that's got water on it and we're about to dissolve? Maybe we need to get out of here." Well,
speaking of Shiloh, another thing we can talk about too is, we have a million ideas we've been talking about for a while with this, but just the fate, like what would have happened if they didn't have that thunderstorm at Shiloh for those 2 days? Because then Buell doesn't arrive on time.
Yeah,
they probably get pushed right back in a Pittsburgh Landing right off and that's probably
Wallace's roads might get muddied up if he's finally fucking found his way.
What happens if Albert Sidney Johnson doesn't get killed? And we talked about that a million times.
Yeah, because he was
if you have a guy in that Western theater who could challenge Grant and Sherman. Does Grant come east if Johnson's still there? Probably not.
No.
So there's no overland campaign. Does Meade do what Grant did? I don't know. Maybe. That's why we studied this 150 friggin' years later, because there's so many ifs, the what ifs, and it's not just the stuff we talked about before about Ewell and the Hill and all that stupid shit, but just the little things. These are the things I think about when I'm at home alone and the power goes out, in case you're curious.
Me too.
Damn, what if it didn't rain in Shiloh?
The power was out one time, I think, when I was living with my parents, and we were just sitting there in silence, and I think I said something. I don't know what it was. I'm like, I don't know why he didn't take the hill, but it's bothering. I think I was like 10. That
was before the shark epidemic at Lake Huron too.
Yeah, exactly.
But all those little things. That's what gets you in these battles. You think about these guys marching in linear formation and battle formation and all this stuff, and all these things most of these battles were determined by complete luck.
Oh,
on so many little things. And,
sure.
you know, I was listening to the Battle of Gettysburg podcast today, which, like we said, everyone should listen to that.
Yeah.
Because Hessler and Lindblad, they're great. That is a great hardcore nerd fest. You watch, you know, listen to them for a while. And I was listening to the episode that they had Gary Edelman on talking about Little Round Top and the misconceptions of Little Round Top. Honestly, I'm a Round Top guy though, because I mean, I think that if they would have gotten up there, if Benning had followed law like he should have, they would have taken Round Top. And the question is, could they get artillery up there? That was a pain in the ass, because even the Union guys, that's all they talked about was just lugging the guns up there.
Yeah.
But if they could have got up there, but the Sixth Corps probably would have pushed them off. Realistically, they probably would have. But if they got a gun battery up there and they could fire along the line, who knows?
Yeah.
You know, maybe they do retreat.
The what ifs are so just, I don't know, like when you think about, like, what if Warren had went up there and spied that ground? You know, the other thing that I was just thinking of too is there's a lot of battles in the Western Theater that are just as horrific as those battles in the Eastern Theater. Like Kennesaw Mountain is just like what happened at Mary's Height, how those men had to go up and they were just like literally like aim the rifles down and shoot them. But they were also, that's another place where Claiborne was. And I think where Claiborne was the worst. That's where the Union had it the worst.
If anybody's been at Kennesaw and you've walked Cheatham Hill, and it's in Picket Charge is a picnic compared to Cheatham Hill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why they did that? Because it was a mini version of Pickett's Charge. What was neat about Cheatham Hill, though, was they took a break in the middle of the battle.
Yeah.
And the Confederates and the Union guys played cards with each other and buried the dead and hung out and traded tobacco. And then, okay, break, so everybody go back. And they started killing each other again. They just took a break in the middle of it. But if you walk that ground, they had no chance. Absolutely no chance. You know, and it's a great vista and it's a great place to walk if you haven't gone. So anybody who hasn't been to Kennesaw or any of these Western theaters, that's the only one I've been to in the West. I'm not like you who's been at Chickamauga a million times of those places.
Yeah, we'll road trip to Chickamauga sometime.
Yeah, but definitely. But that's your place though.
Yeah,
you know, and that's but that's awesome.
Snodgrass Hill is like Little Round Top for me. Little Round Top is the most powerful spot on earth for me. But next to that is Snodgrass Hill, where Thomas did what he did. That is like a place where you can go and stand and you can like almost feel like how confident he was in that. Like he's gonna hold this because he's got to, because Rosecrans is like fucking back in Chattanooga.
Well, what if
line stretches like a mile long?
Speaking of Thomas, he's a Virginian. What if he stays with the Confederacy? Ooh. Which he very well could have and probably should have. You know, Lee certainly didn't.
Yep.
Right? I mean, he got the hell out of that pretty quick. But yeah, those are the fun things to think about. Is anybody who studies this does the what if thing. You just do, because it's unavoidable.
You can't help but do that because it's fun. And there's some that don't like the what if, but to me it's like, no, let's talk about it, because it allows you to to think about what you know about the person and apply it to a different situation to talk about how they would react. And I think it actually furthers learning in the long term and helps you to understand them better for why they made the decisions they made.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, absolutely. And just going, what personal demons were they fighting when they were making these decisions? You know, what was going on in their heads about who do I fight for? There's that famous story when Armistead and they were all out in that small little outpost called Los Angeles when the war broke out. Plenty of beach property available back then. You know, Malibu Beach, you could buy whatever you wanted back then. But I mean, they're all going off to fight war and stuff like that. You know, and it makes you wonder what they was going through their heads. Yeah. You know, deciding, well, do I fight for a country who I took an oath to, who I have a lot of friends with, or I fight for my very own state? And that's a big difference now in this country, is now it's not a state pride like it was back then. Mm-hmm. And that's because of the Civil War. The Civil War brought the country into one country, versus then it was your state. You fought for your state. It was that line in the movie where, Virginia is my home, my government of my home is my home. I think it was Kemper who said that in that scene. And he's right about that, because back then they didn't believe in a strong federal government. They certainly cared more about what their governor felt than what their president did, especially if you didn't agree with the president. Nowadays, the president of the United States is the one who kind of runs everything. There's just not that state pride anymore like there was. And that's why, how when you look at all the impact the post-Civil War impact into this country now. In the Ken Burns documentary, Shelby Foote, who is a heavenly lost causer, by the way. I mean, if you want to talk about a capital L lost causer, it's Shelby Foote. But he talks about, he says, you can't, and he's right about this. I think he's right. He says, you can't understand the American culture today without a firm understanding of the American Civil War, because it defined the country good and bad from what it was and what it is now. And all the issues this country has now are still spillovers from the Civil War.
Yep.
And you could trace it to the Civil War and the Lincoln assassination.
Oh, I talk about that all the time. You know? I was at a family gathering one time, and one of my cousins said, "Why is this happening in the U.S.?" And my uncle just pointed to me and said, "Mary, explain why," because I'd had many conversations with him about it. And I just said, Civil War.
The Civil War ripped open a wound that was coming, and instead of, like, when you break your arm, you break a leg, you were a splint, you get a cast, and it heals. They let it heal on its own. Yeah. And it didn't grow back right. I mean, it's functioning, but it still shows the wear and the damage because it wasn't allowed to completely heal because of Lincoln's assassination. And we talk about the Booth thing and the assassination. That's really the damage he did. Isn't 1865 U.S., it's 20th and 21st century U.S. is really the damage he really, really did. Oh, yeah. And when you study him at a complete uber nerd level like I do, it's very obvious, it's very clear that that's the long-term damage he did.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Somebody who's been like, full disclosure, like the night that I got into Lincoln, I was just as into Booth. Now I'm going to put it out here. Like, I hate what he did, but he is a fascinating figure in history to study. You have to study him as part of the Lincoln assassination. And by studying him, by studying the other conspirators, you're going to learn more about Lincoln and his presidency, about why they did this, and in turn more about the Civil War, and also more about the conflict that is still happening in America to this day.
We'll do a lot on them, the conspirators, and not just Booth, but all the Davy Herolds, the Atzerots, the Powells, right down the line. Like we've said a million times, they're all so different from each other. Mm-hmm. And how this group of people all got together is kind of a silly story anyway. Knowing everything they had to go through and everything they were thinking of, and that these people had lives, and they had families too, and they had their own things and whatever demons they were fighting to do what they did. And to your point, Booth is, he's an absolute capital V villain. He is. And when we talk about Booth, by no means are we deifying him or saying he's anything but that. But it's important to understand what he did, why he did it, what was going through his mind, and the impact he's had in society, life, and politics since then.
Yep, it's like Voldemort in Harry Potter. You can't make Booth into he who must not be named.
And we've said this before. You can't possibly do a 360 study on Lincoln without really knowing John Wilkes Booth, because he's a big part of the story. He is, and people, the very pro-Lincoln people, obviously don't like to talk about Booth, and I totally understand that. Mm-hmm. But you can't pretend he's he isn't what he is. He's someone who very famous the time before. Yep. Was connected to a lot of famous people, and what he did was absolutely horrible. And by no means anybody going to say that's not the case, but understanding what this guy was all about.
Exactly.
And we'll have guests on who will talk about that, and we'll talk more about all those things. I think it's going to be interesting to really, like we said when this whole thing started, before you became a floating silhouette.
Yeah, I know. I'm like a ghost right now. I have to keep leaning back in. I forgot to turn on my fucking porch light.
This is the segue of the Ghost of Gettysburg, Mary edition. Exactly. There's every time you poke yourself, make sure and see your hand go right through your face. There you go. All right. Make sure it doesn't go all the way through. See if you can go all the way through your ear, though. See if you do a little Chamberlain Ramrod thing. Wow. A burb on the podcast?
Yeah. And then our listeners just find out that we're best friends, right? So
exactly. But I think that's what's going to be great about this, is we'll be able to really do this, and like we said at the beginning, is make people think, and maybe get people to study more about some of this cast of characters, not just go with what you were taught or what the popular mainstream is about every one of these guys. And I think once you get to know them as people, your outlook will be a little bit different.
Yep, I 100% agree with you. I actually think that is a good spot for us to end off for our first episode, because I think we were at about an hour.
That was an hour. Wow, that was quick.
About an hour it was.
It was
really
about an hour.
It was about an hour. Got to get some Canadian there. So we will definitely be back with you again soon. We are planning on putting these out once a week, probably Saturday around 9 o'clock. I'm the editor of them, so the sound's not perfect.
So it might be 9:30.
The sound's not perfect. I am learning. I know the editor of Real Sweater Podcast, so I can always consult him too.
I'm just impressed you actually recorded this one. If it didn't have a little red little record in the top corner, I think we just completely wasted our time talking to people.
No, I've got a little, don't worry. I've got a little record in my top corner here. I've got it there. We're good.
No, it's definitely. But this will be fun. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So hopefully we get some people talking about it and get some people conversing about it. And hopefully some people watch it. That'd be cool.
Yeah, no, that would be really cool. I'm hoping I can get this up onto YouTube somehow or onto Facebook on our Facebook page, which I have to create. So we do have Twitter and Instagram accounts. We are just Civil War Breakfast Club. As well, we each have our own Twitter accounts. So Darren is Darren J. Weeks on Twitter, and I am Civil War fan. Or no, I'm at Miss Bellatrix, Miss_Bellatrix. Harry Potter.
You got your own Twitter handle. That's impressive.
I did, yes. Well, my name on there is Civil War Fangirl, and
everybody knows Civil War Fangirl. Come on.
And Darren's also on Instagram too as Darren J. Weeks, and I'm on Instagram as Civil War Fangirl. So you can find us on there, as well as, like I said, find us at Civil War Breakfast Club. Once we get our Facebook page up and running, we are going to do our best to post ahead of time what our topics are going to be, because we would like to get questions from our listeners to not only just kind of look at where we need to take our discussion, but just to answer those when we're recording them as well, and just find out what you guys want to know as well. So we want to make this as an interactive as community as possible and as open and accepting as well. So we don't want anybody to feel shy about joining or think like, oh, I'm too geeky. You're not too geeky.
Nobody's more geeky than us. So
Trust us.
And if anybody has any ideas,
Yes, we are open to any episode ideas, anything you guys want us to talk about. We welcome suggestions. Also, we would welcome beer recommendations too.
I like that.
Yeah.
Just no one say Bud Lime.
But except for Miller Lite, Bud Light, Molson Canadian, Labatt Blue. That shit's not allowed on this show.
This is a quality beer establishment we're talking about.
Darren learned the hard way about drinking Miller Lite.
Oh, God. It's okay. Well, this is fun. So we'll look forward to definitely doing this again soon. We'll decide what our topic is going to be. We got a bunch of ideas already.
Yeah.
And so we just got to decide what we want to do next. And then we'll get this whole floating silhouette thing. That'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, I will make sure I'm in a better spot next time where I'm going to have to probably... It's kind of
cool, though, the way it is.
It's except weird.
Close, but but it's really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think everyone's going to really enjoy it. I think it'll be entertainment. I think it'll be educational.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be something that people hopefully tune in and watch on a regular basis.
Yep, hopefully. And so to those listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching the first episode of Civil War Breakfast Club. And we will definitely be back with you again very soon. So until then, have like an awesome Saturday, because that's when you'll be listening to this. Cheers. And hey, if you're into beer, make sure if you're listening to this Saturday afternoon, make sure you're drinking a beer while you're doing it. So anyway,
or it'd be real cool if it was a Saturday morning drinking a beer watching this.
Oh, hey, I've done that.
Because as Benjamin Franklin astutely once said, you cannot drink all day unless you start in the morning.
Exactly.
And he's right about that.
That's true. So any parting thoughts, Darren?
Nope. I'm just looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
I can't wait till the next one.
Yep. So on behalf of Darren and myself, everybody have a wonderful Saturday, or we're launching this on Saturday. So have a wonderful Saturday, and we will see you all again soon. Bye.
Peace out. See ya.